So I just purchased a ticket for the Museum of Ho Chi Minh City. About $1.30 a ticket, US. They got, of course, a lot of military war. Manufactured by the Soviet Union, 1939. They also have things that they used to celebrate victory. Captain of the Vietnamese People's Army, A-37 fighter. I don't think the locals have much interest in this. You see a few Vietnamese. It's more for Western tourists. There you go. 1975, April. So this is, days before the end of the war. Very celebratory. But I think the inside of the museum, I'm going to go there in a minute, is more than just the history of the American War, as they call it. We call it the Vietnam War, of course. I think it's more the history of the city itself, but we'll see in a moment. So I'm entering now. I'm trying to see the actual history of the building. I'm guessing it's French colonial, but it's tough to find an actual date for the beginning of the museum, but it's absolutely stunning architecture. Here we go. Let's provide some historical background. It's just in Vietnamese here. It's an English translation, but you can see the timeline up in the top here. Interestingly, the main display is covered by recent events. So I'm going to go back here. And I believe there's some kind of chronological order. I'm not really sure. 1911, 1925. So it's celebrating history. Very nice outside. So I believe this is where I should have started. I was in the wrong room. And they do have English translation. So it goes back to 17th century, 1650 to 1700. Very interesting. So our timeline. Message to generals and troops. Got the layout of the city, citadel. Here's the French attack and French colonialism. And you can understand why they're proud that they resisted first French colonialism and then the continuation of it with the U.S. And then on the other side, my interpretation, they're kind of celebrating progress and modernity. Infrastructure, architecture, which they should be proud of. It's pretty amazing considering just 50 years ago, most of the country was bombed into basically nothing. More bombs dropped on Vietnam than every single bomb dropped in the entirety of World War II. Some archaeological excavations. Pretty neat. Archaeological sites of Vietnam. Very cool. It looks like they had some kind of video interactive that may be working or not. I don't know. I am going through this kind of quickly. I got a short period of time before I go back to the hotel to see the kids, but this is something kids would be bored out of their minds here, but I find pretty interesting. I believe I was here in 2013 as well, but memory. Looks like a storm is coming, so it's a perfect time to be inside of a museum. the storm is raging outside. You go into here, which I expected to be more of a history of the conflict. It starts, of course, at the end of the French era of colonialism. You hear the doors, the shutters slamming as the storm comes. Lots of photos. They got the patriotic music and narration. I mean, I've read a lot up on the war with the French and the U.S. But when you actually see these photos, you kind of understand, as much as I'm a pacifist and hate war in general, you kind of understand the national pride, the nationalism. Even so many decades removed, and you see how people lived and endured occupation through resistance. The storm is raging out there. Take a break from this room, you can see pretty common in tropical countries, intense downpour. Bicycle. Popular transport for conscript laborers and voluntary youth, part of the war resistance. And this, letters of a martyr. Letters to the South, one of the many kind of revolutionary leaders. More from the war footage. You know, I hate to just call it propaganda videos because that's what it is, but isn't all war propaganda part of it? And who am I to critique as an American? I'm as fascinated by the beauty of this building as I am by the actual exhibitions here. It's got to be 1800s colonial. I'm trying to find actual history of the building. More about the revolutionary struggle. So the museum's not completely dedicated to the war. It's a major focus because they do have the archaeological section, pre-colonial times. And again, you could understand the focus being around the war. Not just because it's recent history, but victors write the history, of course. So over here, we have, this is more about the resistance to French colonialism. Of course, there was that brief period during World War II where Japan briefly occupied the majority of Vietnam, from my understanding. Then the French took back their colonial empire after World War II. Not much was left at that point. Here's the birth of the Communist Party. We got some various leaders, comrades as they'd call them. 1930-31. You know, it's interesting that, Ho Chi Minh spent many years abroad in Paris. Apparently he was in the United States even for a short period. So a lot of the time when the Communist Party was building up its political force and resistance, he was still abroad. I believe he was abroad until the 30s or 40s, but he was kind of communicating, and he was being trained in Moscow at one point. And of course, you see the connection to the Soviets, pictures of Marx and Lenin. Strategic guidelines of the party. And I'm going through this really fast. This is about arsenal. Not too interested in that stuff, but you got communication, one of the old flags of resistance. Almost like animatronics of revolutionary leaders. Literal spears that they make for weapons. I think any American who's critical of this should look in the mirror and think about our own resistance to colonialism, British colonialism, and how we use our own propaganda to kind of put the founding fathers up on a pedestal, knowing that they were imperfect people, knowing that it was more than just one cause for resistance, whether it was taxation or other different variables. Oh, look at that. A nice 1970s Vespa. Suzuki motorbike. This is kind of neat. And printing press. Look at that. 1965 to 1969. That is cool. Some kind of wagon. Yep, a cart. Wow. That's super cool. And again, the storm is a raging outside. More weapons of war. Resistance. I'm probably going in the wrong order here. Oh yeah, now we're at the end of the war. The crashing of the gates. Liberation Army, April 30th, 1975. U.S. calls this withdrawal, but let's face it, it was a resounding defeat of empire. Radio communication. You got the monks with resistance, famously lighting themselves on fire. You got the victims of war here. There's also the War Remnants Museum as well, which I'm probably not going to go to. I've already been there in the past. You got the famous tunnels, re-education camps, education, I don't know what you call it. Again, even as a pacifist, I think it's easy and very privileged of me to say that I'm opposed to all war and killing when I've never lived through decades of colonial occupation. Of course, you had the flag of liberation, uniting the North, red, and the South in blue. Now the flag is just solidly red. Seems like the tourists are more into the history, the background. The locals are doing a lot of photo shoots with like professional things, women dressed up. I don't know if it's for a special occasion or just in general because they're here. So there you go. Lots of good photo ops here. Little canoe here. It's not so little. Textile, raise fund for the party. Another revolutionary hero. I do appreciate the fact they, I don't want to say equally celebrate women, but show the contributions of women in the war effort. Somebody who's kind of a cynic would say, oh, that's just part of the propaganda showing communist equality. But I think there's a realism to that. It wasn't just soldiers. It was definitely a unified effort. Okay, now we're going into modernity in the sense of taking pride in development, industry starting at the turn of the 20th century. And this is really neat. I think what's also remarkable, whether you look at Vietnam or China, any of these countries that went from being largely agrarian nation states to now being modern capitalist powerhouses, is just how fast they develop. You don't have to be a capitalist, a communist to kind of appreciate human ingenuity and progress. I mean, it's pretty incredible. You go from simple weight scales at the market to having one of the biggest buildings in the world. And they're even something about I didn't even know about this, space program and satellites. Of course, the metro line, we're going to ride on that later today. Something that's part of not just modern development, but their national pride. I'm really looking forward to seeing the metro. It's supposed to be pretty modern and spectacular. Walk through here some more. A little bit dark down the hallway. The rain is still raging, so no rush for me to get out. I don't know what this building is. Oh, this might be the so-called Liberation Palace, the government of the South, where the tanks famously went through the walls. Do not touch. That's good. Some kind of table. So there you go. All right, and I think this concludes my very fast mini tour of the Museum of Ho Chi Minh City.